He looked at his wife holding their 2-day-old son in her trembling arms and spoke 5 words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Get out. We're done." He thought he was discarding a burden. He thought he was trading up. But he had no idea that the shivering woman standing on his porch had just become the sole owner of the very skyscraper he worked in. He kicked her out into the rain, unaware that in 24 hours she wouldn't just be his ex-wife, she would be his boss. This is the story of the ultimate regret. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall. It hammered against the roof of the small rented bungalow on Elm Street, sounding like gravel thrown against tin. Inside, the air was warm, but the atmosphere was freezing. Brooklyn shifted the weight of the car seat, her arms aching. She had been discharged from Seattle Grace Hospital only an hour ago. Her body was still swollen, her stitches from the C-section pulling tight with every step, sending sharp jolts of pain up her side. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She had called Todd 3 times from the hospital lobby. No answer. She had texted him that she was coming home in an Uber. No reply. "Todd," Brooklyn called out, her voice raspy. She pushed the front door closed with her hip shaking the water from her coat. "Todd, we're home. He slept the whole way." The living room was strangely uncluttered. That was the first thing she noticed. The pile of mail that usually sat on the console table was gone. The throw blankets were folded with military precision. And then she saw the suitcases. 3 large black suitcases stood like sentries near the door. Todd was sitting in his leather recliner, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the blank television screen. He wore his good suit, the Navy Brooks Brothers one he usually saved for big presentations at Wellington Logistics. "Todd," Brooklyn whispered, a cold flush rising on her neck. Are we going somewhere?" Todd finally turned. His face was unreadable, a mask of smooth indifference that was more terrifying than anger. He stood up, took a slow sip of his drink, and set the glass down on a coaster. "No, Brooklyn," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "We aren't going anywhere. You are." Brooklyn blinked, confused. She looked down at the sleeping infant in the carrier, little Noah, barely 48 hours old, and then back at her husband of 3 years. "I don't understand. Is this a joke? I just had surgery, Todd. I can barely walk." "It's not a joke," a female voice said from the kitchen. Brooklyn froze. The kitchen door swung open and a woman walked out. It was Jessica. Brooklyn knew her. Jessica was the junior account manager at Todd's firm. She was 22, ambitious, and currently wearing Brooklyn's favorite cashmere robe, the one Brooklyn had received as a wedding gift. Jessica leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. She looked at Brooklyn with a mixture of pity and disgust, as if Brooklyn were a stray dog that had wandered into a 5-star restaurant. "Todd, what is she doing here?" Brooklyn's voice trembled. "She lives here now," Todd said, walking over to stand beside Jessica. He didn't put his arm around her. He just stood there, presenting a united front. "I've been trying to find the right time to tell you, but there never is a right time. I'm not happy, Brooklyn. I haven't been happy for a long time." "You're leaving me?" Brooklyn gasped, clutching the handle of the car seat so hard her knuckles turned white. "Now I just gave birth to your son." "That's exactly why." Todd snapped his calm facade, cracking for a second. "Look at you, Brooklyn. You're a mess. You have no ambition. You're content living paycheck to paycheck, couponing for groceries. I'm rising at Wellington Logistics. I need a partner who fits the image of a VP. Jessica understands the corporate world. You just want to be a mom. I supported you while you got your MBA. Brooklyn screamed, the tears finally spilling over. I worked double shifts at the diner so you could study. And now that you have a little money, I'm not good enough. Todd sighed, checking his watch. This isn't a debate. I paid the rent on this place through the end of the month, but the landlord knows the lease is transferring to my name only starting tomorrow. You need to leave. Now. It's pouring rain, Brooklyn cried. I have nowhere to go. My parents are gone. I have a newborn baby, Todd. Your son. Todd glanced at the car seat, his expression tightening. I'll send you a check for child support once the lawyers draft the papers. But right now I can't have a crying baby here. I have a meeting with the regional director in the morning. I need sleep. He picked up the nearest suitcase, Brooklyn's suitcase, she realized, and dragged it to the front door, opening it to the storm outside. The wind howled, spraying rain into the hallway. Todd, please, Brooklyn begged, dropping to her knees, ignoring the tearing pain in her abdomen. Just let me stay in the guest room for a week, just until I can find a place. Don't do this to Noah. Jessica walked forward, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She crouched down, not to help, but to look Brooklyn in the eye. Don't make this pathetic, Brooklyn. Have some dignity. He doesn't want you. Todd grabbed Brooklyn by the arm, hauling her up. Get out, Brooklyn, before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. He shoved the other 2 suitcases onto the porch. Brooklyn stumbled backward instinctively, curling her body around the car seat to protect Noah. She backed out onto the wet concrete. Here, Todd said, tossing a thick envelope onto the wet ground. That's $500. Should get you a motel for a few nights. Don't come back. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Brooklyn stood alone in the dark, the rain instantly soaking her hair and pajamas. Inside the car seat, Noah woke up and began to wail. Brooklyn didn't remember walking to the bus stop. It was a blur of headlights, honking horns, and the rhythmic sobbing of her son. She sat on the metal bench under the flimsy plastic shelter, shivering violently. Her suitcase was soaked. The envelope of money was stuffed into her bra, the only safe place she could think of. She checked her phone. 14% battery. She scrolled through her contacts. Who could she call? Her mother had passed away 2 years ago. Her father had left when she was a toddler. She didn't even know his name, only that he was some kind of businessman who wanted nothing to do with them. Her friends, most had drifted away after she married Todd, who had systematically isolated her, claiming her friends were low-value people. She dialed the local women's shelter. I'm sorry, honey, the weary voice on the other end said. We're at capacity tonight. The storm brought everyone in. Try the Salvation Army downtown, but they usually fill up by 600 p.m. It was 9:30 p.m. Brooklyn hung up, suppressing a scream. She opened her banking app. Balance, $42.50. Todd had drained the joint savings account. He had left her with nothing but the cash in the envelope. It's okay, Noah, she whispered, rocking the car seat, her tears mixing with the rain dripping from her nose. Mommy's here. Mommy's going to fix it. But she didn't know how. She was 26, unemployed, having quit the diner to prepare for the baby homeless and recovering from major surgery. A car slowed down in front of the bus stop. Brooklyn tensed up. It wasn't a bus. It was a sleek black Bentley with tinted windows. It looked out of place in this neighborhood, gleaming under the streetlights like a panther. Brooklyn pulled the car seat closer, her heart hammering. Was this a predator? Someone looking to take advantage of a vulnerable woman? The rear window rolled down with a soft electric hum. "Mrs. Brooklyn Bennett," a voice called out. Brooklyn froze. She hadn't used her maiden name Bennett since she married Todd. "Who's asking?" she said, her voice shaking. The car door opened and a man stepped out. He didn't care about the rain. He was an older gentleman, perhaps in his 60s, wearing an immaculate charcoal suit and holding a large black umbrella. He walked toward her with a purposeful stride, his posture rigid and respectful. "My name is Arthur Pennyworth," the man said, extending the umbrella to cover her and the baby. "I am the senior executor for the estate of Dominic Valerius." Brooklyn stared at him. "Dominic Valerius? The tech mogul? I think you have the wrong person." "I do not," Arthur said softly. He looked at the suitcases, then at the crying baby, and finally at the devastation on Brooklyn's face. His professional mask softened into genuine sympathy. "Dominic Valerius passed away 3 days ago in Zurich. He was your father, Brooklyn." Brooklyn felt the world spin. "My father? No. My father was a deadbeat who left my mom before I was born. He wasn't a billionaire." "He was a complicated man," Arthur corrected gently. "He made many mistakes. Leaving your mother was the biggest one. But he kept tabs on you. He knew you married Todd. He knew you were pregnant." Arthur paused, looking toward the direction of the house she had just been kicked out of. "He also knew your husband was unsatisfactory." Brooklyn let out a bitter, hysterical laugh. "Unsatisfactory. That's one word for it." "Mrs. Bennett," Arthur said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a handkerchief. He offered it to her. "Under the terms of Mr. Valerius's last will and testament, there were specific conditions regarding your inheritance. He wanted to ensure you were free of certain entanglements before he intervened. However, seeing your current situation, I believe I have the discretionary power to accelerate the timeline." "Inheritance." Brooklyn wiped her face. "I don't want his money. Where was he when my mom died?" "He paid for her hospital bills anonymously," Arthur revealed quietly. "And he paid for your college tuition routed through a scholarship fund. He watched from afar. He was a coward in matters of the heart, Brooklyn, but he was a genius in matters of finance. And he has left you everything." Brooklyn stared at him. "Everything." "The Valerius Group," Arthur listed. "The real estate holdings, the tech patents, the majority shares in several global logistics firms, including the parent company of Wellington Logistics." Brooklyn's breath hitched. "Wellington, where Todd works, the very same?" Arthur said, a glint of steel entering his eyes. "You now own 51% of the holding company that owns his employer, but we can discuss the portfolio later. Right now, you and Master Noah need a warm place to sleep." Arthur gestured to the open door of the Bentley. The interior looked like a spaceship, warm leather, soft amber lighting. "Where are you taking me?" Brooklyn asked, hesitating. "To the Four Seasons for tonight," Arthur said. "And tomorrow, to the Valerius estate on the cliffs. It is your home now." Brooklyn looked back at the dark street leading to the bungalow where her husband was currently drinking scotch with his mistress. She looked at the luxury car. She looked at her son. "Arthur," she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Does Todd know?" Arthur smiled, a thin, sharp expression. "No one knows. The will is sealed until you formally accept it. As far as the world knows, the empire is in limbo. As far as your husband knows, you are homeless." Brooklyn stood up. The pain in her side flared, but she ignored it. She lifted the car seat and walked toward the Bentley. "Let's keep it that way," she said. For now. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons was larger than the entire house Brooklyn had shared with Todd. Arthur had arranged for a private doctor to come to the room to check on her stitches and examine Noah. Everything was taken care of. For the first time in days, Brooklyn slept. She woke up the next morning to the smell of fresh coffee and the sight of Seattle's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. But it wasn't just a new day. It was a new life. Arthur was waiting in the sitting area, a tablet and a stack of documents on the table. "Good morning, Miss Bennett," Arthur said. He had already reverted to her maiden name. "I trust you slept well." "I did," Brooklyn said, wrapping a plush robe around herself. She felt different. The fear from the night before had calcified into a cold, hard resolve. "What happens now?" "Now," Arthur said, tapping the stack of papers. "We execute the transition. You have inherited assets totaling approximately $1.4 billion. However, your father was a man of theatricality. He left a video message." Arthur handed her an iPad. He pressed play. The screen showed a man who looked shockingly like Brooklyn, the same dark eyes, the same jawline. He was sitting in a high-tech office looking frail, but intense. "Brooklyn," the man on the screen said. His voice was deep. "If you are watching this, I am gone. I have no excuse for my absence in your life. I built an empire but failed to build a family. I leave you my work, my burden, and my power. But power must be wielded, not just held. You are married to a man named Todd. My investigators tell me he is a small man with a big ego. If he is still by your side and treating you well, you may share this fortune with him. If he has failed you..." The man on the screen leaned in close to the camera. "Then use my legacy to crush him. Valerius blood does not suffer fools. Welcome to the game, my daughter." The video ended. Brooklyn stared at the black screen. "Crush him," she whispered. "We have a situation developing," Arthur said, checking his phone. "This morning, Todd filed for divorce electronically. He cited irreconcilable differences and is petitioning for full custody of the child, claiming you are unstable and homeless. He wants to avoid paying child support." Brooklyn's hands clenched into fists. "He threw me out. How can he claim I'm unstable because I'm homeless when he made me homeless?" "The law is a game of narratives," Arthur said calmly. "He has a job, a home, and a lawyer. As of yesterday, you had nothing. But the narrative changes today." "I want him to pay," Brooklyn said. "Not money. I want him to feel what I felt. I want him to feel small." "Then we must be strategic," Arthur advised. "The board of directors at the Valerius Group is meeting in 3 days to discuss the succession. They expect the company to be divided up or sold. They do not know you exist. You must present yourself not as a scorned wife, but as an empress." "I don't know the first thing about running $1 billion company, Arthur. I was a waitress. I clipped coupons." "You have your father's DNA," Arthur said. "And you have me. I will teach you the logistics, but the attitude that must come from you." The next 72 hours were a blur of transformation. It wasn't just a makeover. It was a reconstruction. A team of stylists, image consultants, and executive coaches descended on the suite. Brooklyn's hair was cut into a sharp, powerful bob. The flannel pajamas were replaced by tailored Dior suits and Louboutin heels. But the most important work happened at the table with Arthur. He drilled her on the company structure. "The Valerius Group owns strictly holding companies," Arthur explained. "One of our subsidiaries is Apex Holdings. Apex owns Wellington Logistics. So I am Todd's boss's boss's boss. Brooklyn mused, looking at the organizational chart. Precisely. And Wellington Logistics is currently bidding for a massive government contract. A contract that Todd is in charge of securing. If he fails, his career is over. If he succeeds, he gets a massive promotion. When is the pitch meeting for the contract? Brooklyn asked. Next week, Arthur said. It will be held at the Apex headquarters. The CEO of Apex, Mr. Henderson, will be there. And the new owner of the Valerius Group U is entitled to sit in. Brooklyn smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. Arthur, get me into that meeting. But ensure my name isn't on the agenda. I want to be a surprise. As you wish. Arthur bowed. Meanwhile, across the city, Todd was celebrating. He sat in the corner office he had just been promoted to, temporarily. With Brooklyn gone, he felt lighter. Jessica was organizing his desk. You really think you'll get the government contract? Jessica asked, sitting on the edge of his desk. It's in the bag. Todd laughed, spinning in his chair. The guys at Apex don't know the market like I do. I'm going to walk into that boardroom, dazzle them with the numbers, and secure my VP spot. Then with the raise, I'll hire a shark lawyer to make sure Brooklyn never sees a dime. Maybe I'll even take full custody of the kid, just to spite her. You're bad, Jessica giggled. I'm a winner, babe, Todd corrected. Brooklyn was a loser. She dragged me down. Now the sky's the limit. He had no idea that the sky was about to fall on his head. The headquarters of Apex Holdings was a fortress of glass and steel in downtown Seattle, looming over the city like a modern-day castle. For Todd, entering this building was usually a routine of swiping a badge and ignoring the security guards. Today, however, he walked in with a swagger that bordered on manic. He was wearing a new suit he had bought on Credit Italian wool pinstriped. He checked his reflection in the elevator doors as he ascended to the 40th floor. Showtime, he muttered to himself. Beside him, his boss, a nervous man named Greg, was sweating. Todd, are you sure about these figures? The projections for the government logistics contract seem aggressive. Relax, Greg, Todd scoffed, adjusting his tie. The board eats aggression for breakfast. If we go in there timid, we lose. I'm going to sell them the dream. By noon, I'll be a VP. They stepped out into the executive lobby. It was unusually quiet. The receptionist, usually chatty, didn't look up. There was a heaviness in the air, the kind of atmospheric pressure drop that precedes a tornado. They entered the main boardroom. It was a cavernous space, with a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on. At the head of the table sat Mr. Henderson, the CEO of Apex. Flanking him were 6 board members, men and women, with faces carved from granite. But there was an empty chair at the very head of the table, the chairman's seat. Gentlemen, Todd announced, placing his briefcase on the table with a loud thud. Thank you for seeing us. I've prepared a presentation that will revolutionize how Wellington Logistics handles government contracts. Mr. Henderson didn't smile. He looked at the empty chair, then back at Todd. Before you begin, Todd, we have a guest. The majority shareholder of our parent company, the Valerius Group, has undergone a change in leadership. The new owner decided to sit in on this pitch personally. Todd blinked. The owner, I thought, old man Valerius, was a ghost. Never leaves Europe. Mayor Valerius passed away, Henderson said solemnly. His successor is very hands-on. The double doors at the back of the room opened. Todd turned around, a charming smile plastered on his face, ready to schmooze the new billionaire owner. The smile died instantly. It didn't just fade, it shattered. Walking into the room was a woman. She wore a tailored white suit that looked like it cost more than Todd's car. Her hair was sharp, sleek, and professional. She wore dark sunglasses, which she slowly removed as she approached the table. It was Brooklyn. Todd's brain short-circuited. He literally couldn't process the image. This was the woman he had kicked out into the rain 3 days ago. The woman who clipped coupons for milk. The woman he had left with $500 and a newborn. "Brooklyn," he choked out, the sound strangled. What are you doing here? Did you follow me?" "Security." He looked frantically at the guards by the door. "This woman is my unstable ex-wife. She's stalking me. Get her out of here." The guards didn't move. Brooklyn didn't look at Todd. She walked past him, her perfume, a scent of jasmine and cold, hard cash filling his nose. She walked straight to the head of the table. Mr. Henderson stood up. The board members stood up. Brooklyn sat down in the chairman's seat. "Sit down, everyone," Brooklyn said. Her voice was calm, commanding, and utterly devoid of the warmth Todd used to know. "Brooklyn, stop this!" Todd hissed, his face turning red. "This is a business meeting. You're embarrassing yourself. How did you get in here? Did you sleep with a guard?" "Mr. Bennett," Mr. Henderson said sharply, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. "You will address the chairwoman with respect." "Chairwoman." Todd looked from Henderson to Brooklyn, his eyes bulging. "She's a waitress. She's a nobody." "I am Brooklyn Valerius," she said, finally locking eyes with him. Her gaze was terrifyingly empty. "And as of 72 hours ago, I own the Valerius Group, which owns Apex, which owns Wellington, which means Todd. I own you." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Todd slumped into a chair, his legs giving out. "That's impossible. Your dad was—" "He wasn't. My father was Dominic Valerius," Brooklyn stated. "Now I believe you were about to pitch a strategy for the government contract, please. Proceed. I'm dying to hear how you plan to spend my money." Todd fumbled with his laptop. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't plug in the HDMI cable. He dropped his notes. He was sweating profusely now. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a primal animalistic fear. He stammered through the first few slides. It was a disaster. He stuttered. He mixed up numbers. "Stop," Brooklyn said softly 5 minutes in. Todd froze. "This data is incorrect," Brooklyn said, glancing at a tablet Arthur had placed in front of her. "You're projecting a 15% margin on shipping, but you haven't accounted for the rising fuel tariffs in the Pacific sector. And you're suggesting we use subcontractors that have a history of labor violations. If we use this pitch, we won't just lose the contract. We'll be sued by the federal government." She looked at the board. "Is this the level of competence we accept at Wellington?" "No, ma'am," Henderson said quickly. "Brooklyn, please," Todd begged, his voice cracking. "I can fix it. I was just nervous." "It's Ms. Valerius," she corrected him, "and you don't get to fix it, because you're fired." "You can't fire me," Todd shouted, standing up. "This is wrongful termination. It's personal." "It is personal," Brooklyn agreed, leaning forward. "But it's also professional. I had my team audit your expense accounts last night, Todd. The dinners with Jessica, the client meetings at hotels. You charged them all to the company card. That's embezzlement." Todd went pale. "Security," Brooklyn said, waving her hand dismissively. "Escort Mr. Bennett out, and make sure he returns the company car, immediately." 2 large guards grabbed Todd by the arms. As they dragged him out of the boardroom, kicking and screaming about lawyers, Brooklyn didn't watch him go. She turned her attention back to the board. "Now," she said, opening a file. "Let's discuss the real strategy." Todd didn't go quietly. He went to the Sharks. A week after being fired, Todd sat in the office of Robert Thorne, a different Thorne than the prohibited one. Let's call him Robert Slate, the most aggressive divorce attorney in Seattle. Slate was known for destroying lives. "Let me get this straight," Slate said, tapping a pen on his desk. "Your wife inherits $1 billion 3 days after you kick her out." "Yes," Todd said. He looked terrible. He was living in a motel now, Jessica having become suddenly distant once the credit card stopped working. "But we were still legally married. No papers were signed. That money is marital property. I want half, and I want full custody of my son." "Why the son?" Slate asked. "Leverage," Todd sneered. "She loves that brat. If I have the kid, she'll pay anything to get him back. I want $500 million. Slate grinned. "I like your style, Mr. Bennett. We'll freeze her assets. We'll paint her as an incompetent mother who is overwhelmed by her new responsibilities. We'll say the sudden wealth has made her mentally unstable." They filed the motion the next day. Brooklyn received the papers while she was feeding Noah in her new office, the penthouse suite of the Valerius Tower. She read them, her face hardening. "He wants full custody," she told Arthur. "He's claiming I'm erratic and absent because of the business." Arthur poured her a cup of tea. "He is playing poker with a blank hand, madame, but he is bluffing hard. We have a court date set for Friday." "I don't want to settle," Brooklyn said. "He thinks he can use my son as a bargaining chip. I want to destroy him in open court." The courtroom was packed. The press had caught wind of the Cinderella billionaire story, and reporters lined the back benches. Todd sat with his lawyer, looking smug. He wore a neck brace, a prop clearly claiming Brooklyn's security guards had injured him. Slate Todd's lawyer stood up and delivered a theatrical opening statement. "Your Honor, my client is a victim. He is a loving father who was discarded by a woman who let money change her. Ms. Valerius has abandoned her maternal duties to play CEO. We demand 50% of the Valerius estate and full physical custody of the minor child, Noah." The judge looked at Brooklyn. "Does the defense have a statement?" Brooklyn's lawyer. A quiet woman named Helen, who Arthur had hired, stood up. "We do, Your Honor, but we would like to submit a piece of evidence first. Exhibit A." She handed a USB drive to the bailiff. "What is this?" Slate objected. "Security footage," Helen said, "from the doorbell camera of the marital home, the night Mr. Bennett claims his wife abandoned him." Todd froze. He had forgotten about the Ring camera. He thought he had cancelled the subscription, but he hadn't. The video played on the large screens in the courtroom. The audio was crisp, the sound of the rain, the sight of Brooklyn holding a newborn begging. "Just let me stay in the guest room for a week. Don't do this to Noah. Get out, Brooklyn. That's $500. Don't come back." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. The judge's face turned thunderous. "This is the loving father?" Helen asked, pausing the video on Todd's sneering face. "A man who throws a 2-day-old infant into a storm." "That's out of context," Todd shouted, standing up. She was being hysterical." "Sit down, Mr. Bennett," the judge barked. "Furthermore," Helen continued, "regarding the financial claim, Mr. Bennett claims the inheritance is marital property. However, Dominic Valerius was a very paranoid man. The trust was established in Switzerland 10 years ago. It contains a bad boy clause." Helen held up a document. "The trust explicitly states that if the beneficiary, Brooklyn, is married at the time of inheritance, the funds remain in a blind trust unless the spouse signs a waiver. However, if the couple is separated, the funds release immediately to her. By filing for divorce before he knew about the money, and by physically ejecting her from the home, Mr. Bennet legally established the date of separation as the night of the rain. Therefore, the inheritance was received post-separation. Todd looked at his lawyer. What does that mean? Slate closed his laptop. It means you screwed yourself, Todd. You filed the papers too early. You don't get a dime. The judge hammered the gavel. In light of the video evidence, I am granting full legal and physical custody to Ms. Valerius. Mr. Bennet, I am issuing a temporary restraining order. You are to stay 500 feet away from the mother and child. And considering your admission of unemployment, I am ordering a forensic audit of your finances to determine alimony payments to your wife for the years she supported you. Todd stood there, mouth open, as his life crumbled. But the twist wasn't over. As they exited the courtroom, Jessica was waiting in the hall. Todd ran to her. Jess, baby, it's a setback, but we can appeal. We just need... Jessica stepped back, disgusted. There is no we, Todd. I saw the news. You're broke. You're blacklisted in the industry. And honestly, you're pathetic. She turned and walked away. Todd stood alone in the courthouse hallway, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi blinding him. 3 months passed, and the divide between Brooklyn and Todd grew from a crack into a canyon. Brooklyn had settled into her role with a grace that surprised even Arthur. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was a natural leader. Her years of managing chaotic dinner shifts and diffusing angry customers had prepared her for the boardroom far better than any MBA program could have. She listened, she was decisive, and she was fair. Under her guidance, the Valerius Group's stock had climbed 12%, and Noah had become the unofficial mascot of the executive floor, cooing in his playpen, while multi-billion-dollar mergers were discussed in hushed tones nearby. But while Brooklyn soared, Todd was rotting. He was living in a damp basement apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place that smelled permanently of mildew and stale frying oil. He had been blacklisted from the logistics industry. Word of his incompetence and his public meltdown at Apex had spread fast. Now he worked under the table as a telemarketer selling dubious extended car warranties to people who hung up on him. The rage inside him wasn't fading. It was festering. It grew like a black mold, consuming his every waking thought. He didn't see his own actions as the cause of his downfall. He saw only Brooklyn's theft of his future. He spent his nights drinking cheap beer and scrolling through news articles about her, zooming in on photos of her at charity galas, wearing jewels that cost more than his life's earnings. He needed a way back in. He needed to hurt her. He needed a nuclear option. One Tuesday night, while rummaging through a stack of water-damaged cardboard boxes he had managed to salvage from the bungalow, Todd found it. It was a manila envelope tucked between an old tax return and a warranty for a blender. Seattle Center for Reproductive Health. Todd frowned, the memory hazy. They had gone there 2 years ago, back when they were first trying for a baby, and nothing was happening. He remembered the doctor being a grim-faced man who spoke in medical jargon. Todd had tuned him out, his ego refusing to accept that anything could be wrong with him. A few months later, Brooklyn had announced she was pregnant, and he had forgotten the visit entirely. He ripped the envelope open. Inside was a detailed analysis of his sample. He squinted at the charts, the bars barely registering above the baseline. He read the summary: severe oligospermia. Viability compromised. He didn't understand the medical nuances. He didn't read the fine print about low probability versus impossibility. He just muttered the low numbers, and then his narcissistic mind made a leap of logic that was both brilliant and delusional. If his numbers were this bad, how did she get what? Pregnant. A slow, evil smile spread across his face, illuminated by the flickering light of his television. "Gotcha," he whispered, clutching the paper like a weapon. "You didn't conceive naturally, did you? You bought him." The next morning, Todd cashed in his last favor with a college buddy who worked for a tabloid blog. He promised a bombshell revelation that would destroy the billionaire darling Brooklyn Valerius. By noon, reporters had gathered outside his basement apartment. It was a pathetic scene, microphones shoved in the face of a man wearing a stained polo shirt. But Todd felt like a king. "Brooklyn Valerius is a fraud," Todd announced to the cameras, his voice trembling with feigned righteous indignation. "She plays the victim. She plays the saint. But she is lying to the world, to her shareholders, and to the courts." He held up the medical paper, though he was careful not to let the cameras see the specific text, only the letterhead. "I have proof that Noah is not my son," Todd declared, dropping the bomb. "And I have reason to believe he is not her son either." The reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Bennett, are you implying she adopted him? Is this about the inheritance?" "It's entirely about the inheritance," Todd shouted, improvising his lie as he went. "The Valerius will had a secret clause. It required an heir within 1 year of death to unlock the billions Brooklyn knew. I couldn't give her a child, so she faked the pregnancy. She used a surrogate, or she bought a baby on the black market to secure the payout. It was a lie, a monstrous, baseless fabrication. But in the age of the internet, the truth is often slower than the scandal. Within hours, Valerius fraud was trending globally. The company's stock took a sharp dip as uncertainty rattled the investors. High above the city, in the penthouse suite of the Valerius Tower, Brooklyn watched the news on a wall-sized screen. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't crying. She sat in a high-backed armchair, feeding Noah a bottle. Her expression terrifyingly calm. Arthur stood by the door, his face pale. "Madam, our legal team is drafting a cease and desist. We can have an injunction against him by morning. We can sue him for defamation." "No," Brooklyn said, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of steel. "A lawsuit takes months. By then the doubt will have set in. He's attacking my son Arthur. He's calling my child a prop." She burped Noah gently, placing him on her shoulder. "He wants a war." Brooklyn stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Arthur, get the car. We're going to the television station." "Madam, are you sure?" Arthur asked, hesitating. Engaging with him might validate his claims. "I'm not going to engage with him," Brooklyn said, walking toward the private elevator. "I'm going to end him." Brooklyn arranged an exclusive live interview for the 600 p.m. primetime news slot. She arrived at the studio looking every inch the Empress' impeccable hair, a simple but expensive dress, and Noah in her arms. The studio was tense. The anchor, a seasoned journalist named Diane, leaned in as the cameras rolled. "Ms. Valerius," Diane began, "your ex-husband made some shocking allegations today. He claims you faked your pregnancy to satisfy a clause in your father's will. He claims he has medical proof that he could not have fathered your child. How do you respond?" Brooklyn looked directly into the camera lens. She imagined Todd sitting in his dark basement, watching this feed, thinking he had won. "My father's will is a matter of public record," Brooklyn said, her voice steady and clear. "There was never a clause requiring an heir. Any first-year law student could verify that. Todd would know that too, if he had ever bothered to read a document in his life. But as his recent firing suggests, attention to detail isn't his strong suit." A faint smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. However, Brooklyn continued, shifting Noah slightly in her lap. Since Mr. Bennett has brought up the topic of biology and secrets, I think it is time to reveal the one secret I did keep. Brooklyn nodded to Arthur, who was standing off stage. He stepped forward and handed the anchor a sealed envelope. Todd claims Noah isn't his son, Brooklyn said softly. And ironically, he is right. Diane's eyes went wide. The control room went silent. He is, yes, Brooklyn said, her voice taking on a tone of gentle, pitying sadness. 2 years ago, when we went to that clinic, the doctors gave us the results. Todd was diagnosed as sterile. Completely. The doctors told him to his face. But Todd, he was a man of immense pride. He was so arrogant, so unable to accept a flaw in himself that he suppressed the memory. He went into denial. He told me everything was fine. Brooklyn looked down at Noah, stroking his cheek, playing the role of the devoted, long-suffering wife to perfection. I wanted a baby, she said, her voice breaking just enough to be heartbreaking. And I loved Todd. Despite his flaws, I wanted to give him the family he wanted. So I made a choice. I used a sperm donor. The studio was dead silent. I never told Todd. Brooklyn confessed to the world. I didn't want to hurt his fragile ego. I let him believe he was the father. I protected his pride until the very end. I let him think he was a man capable of creating life because I loved him enough to carry that secret alone. She looked back into the camera, her gaze piercing through the screen. So Todd, you are right. You have no rights to Noah. Not because I'm a villain, and not because of a conspiracy, but because you couldn't give me a child. You kicked us out into the rain thinking you were abandoning your own blood. But you were just abandoning the only person who ever loved you enough to protect you from the truth. Miss Valerius, Diane whispered, genuinely moved. That is an incredible sacrifice. It was a mistake, Brooklyn corrected, her voice hardening. I tried to protect a man who would eventually leave his newborn in a storm. I won't make that mistake again. In the basement apartment, the silence was deafening. Todd sat on his stained sofa, the remote trembling in his hand. He felt the blood drain from his face. The one card he thought he had, the fake pregnancy, had backfired into the ultimate humiliation. He wasn't the hero exposing a fraud. He was the sterile, delusional ex-husband who had just forced his wife to reveal that she had pitied him. The entire world now knew he couldn't have children. The entire world knew she had covered for him. His phone began to buzz. Not with interview requests, but with mockery. Twitter was already alive with it. He was a laughingstock. Todd stared at the screen at the image of the woman he had discarded, looking untouchable and radiant. He realized then that he hadn't just lost the battle. He had been erased. He screamed a raw, guttural sound of defeat and threw the remote at the television, shattering the screen into a spiderweb of cracks. But as the image flickered and died, he knew he couldn't shatter the truth. He was alone. And he was nothing. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel hummed with the soft, expensive murmur of Seattle's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, the air thick with the scent of lilies and French champagne. It was the inaugural gala for the Valerius Foundation, an event that had been the talk of the city for months. Brooklyn stood on the private balcony, the glass doors sealed shut behind her, muting the applause that was currently thundering inside. The night air was crisp, carrying the salty tang of the Puget Sound. But for the first time in her life, the cold didn't bother her. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that draped over her frame like armor. Her posture straight, her chin held high. She looked down at the city lights, millions of glowing dots stretching out into the darkness. A year ago, she had been down there, shivering on a curb with $500 in her bra and a broken heart. Tonight, she owned the skyline. The heavy glass door slid open with a whisper. Arthur stepped out, closing it gently behind him to preserve the quiet. He held a tablet in one hand and 2 glasses of sparkling water in the other. "The donations are record-breaking tonight, madame," Arthur said, his voice laced with a rare note of pride. "The Second Chance Initiative for Single Mothers in Crisis has been fully funded for the next decade. We have raised enough capital to build 3 new shelters before winter sets in." Brooklyn took the glass he offered her fingers, brushing against the cold crystal. She took a sip, the bubbles sharp against her tongue. "That's good," she said softly, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "No woman should have to stand in the rain. No child should have to sleep in a car seat because their father decided they were an inconvenience. You have turned your pain into a fortress for others," Arthur noted, stepping up beside her to lean against the stone railing. "Your father built an empire of wealth, Brooklyn. You are building an empire of legacy." Brooklyn smiled, but it was a faint, distant thing. "Legacy is complicated, Arthur. It's not just about what you build, it's about what you bury." She turned to face him, her expression hardening slightly. "Do we have the final report?" Arthur nodded. He didn't need to ask who she was referring to. He tapped the screen of his tablet, pulling up a file that contained a single grainy photograph and a few paragraphs of text. "We do." Arthur reported, his tone shifting to pure business. "Mr. Bennett has left the state as predicted. He has relocated to a small industrial town in Ohio. The forensic audit left him with nothing. No savings, no assets, and a credit score that won't allow him to rent anything more than a room." "And his employment?" Brooklyn asked. "He is working as a shift manager at a mid-level logistics warehouse," Arthur read from the file. "The pay is modest. The hours are long. I believe he clocks in at 4 Gudurus a.m. He lives alone in a studio apartment above a laundromat. No social media presence. No girlfriend. He has effectively erased himself." Brooklyn listened to the description of Todd's new life, a prison of mediocrity. It was a fate far worse than jail for a man like Todd. He craved admiration. He breathed validation. To be a nobody, to be a small cog in a machine in the middle of nowhere, was a daily torture. "Does he know?" Brooklyn asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that barely rose above the wind. Arthur looked up, confused. "Know that you are succeeding. I'm sure he avoids the news. It would be too painful for him." "No." Brooklyn shook her head, a strange, unreadable light entering her eyes. "Does he know the truth about you, the donor?" Arthur frowned, lowering the tablet. "I don't follow, madame. The truth is what you told the world on live television, that he was sterile, that you used a donor to spare his feelings. That is why he ran away, the humiliation of his sterility and the realization that Noah wasn't his blood." Brooklyn turned back to the city, gripping the balcony railing until her knuckles turned white. "Arthur, do you remember the medical file Todd found? The one he tried to use to blackmail me?" "Yes, the fertility clinic report." "Todd never read the full report," Brooklyn said, her voice steady and cold. "He only saw the summary page, which flagged low motility and viability concerns. The doctor told us it would be difficult to conceive, bordering on impossible. But he never said it was 0. Arthur went very still. The wind whipped at his suit jacket, but he didn't move. Todd wasn't sterile. Brooklyn confessed the secret, finally spilling out into the night air. He had a low count, yes, but nature found a way. We didn't use a donor, Arthur. I never went to a sperm bank. Noah is his biological son. He has Todd's nose. He has his chin. Arthur stared at her, his mouth slightly open, his composure cracking for the first time in years. You lied, he whispered. You told the entire world he was sterile. You stripped him of his paternity claim on national television. You let him believe he had no genetic connection to the boy. He wanted to disown his son. Brooklyn said, her eyes flashing with a fierce, protective fire. He went on the news to call Noah a fake. He wanted to tell the world that my son was a prop, a distinct entity purchased for a transaction. So I gave him what he wanted. I gave him an out. She turned to Arthur, her expression implacable. If Todd knew Noah was his, he would never stop. He would sue for visitation rights, just to torment me. He would try to poison Noah's mind as he grew up. He would use my son as a pawn for the rest of his life. Brooklyn took a deep breath, the weight of the lie settling comfortably on her shoulders. By convincing Todd that he is sterile, I severed the cord. He believes with total certainty that he has no biological tie to us. He thinks Noah is a stranger's child, and because of that, he will stay in Ohio. He will never look back. He will never knock on my door again. Arthur looked at the woman standing before him. He had known her father a ruthless shark of a man. But Dominic Valerius had used his ruthlessness for greed. Brooklyn was using it for love. It was a terrifying, beautiful distinction. A slow, respectful smile spread across Arthur's face. He bowed his head low. Your father would have been terrified of you, Brooklyn, Arthur said softly. That is the highest compliment I can give. I learned from the best, Brooklyn replied, finishing her water. She turned away from the railing, away from the cold dark, and looked back toward the warmth of the ballroom where her future waited. Inside somewhere in the VIP suite, Noah was sleeping soundly safe and loved, protected by a fortress of billions and a mother who would burn the world down to keep him warm. Todd was gone, a ghost haunting a warehouse in the Midwest, living a lie that he had forced her to design. He had kicked her out to find a better life, and in doing so he had handed her the keys to the kingdom, and she had locked him outside the gates forever. Come, Arthur, Brooklyn said, stepping toward the light. We have guests to entertain. Wow. Talk about a masterclass in revenge. Brooklyn didn't just win. She rewrote the entire narrative to protect her son. Do you think what she did at the end, lying about the paternity to keep Todd away, was justified? Or was it too cruel? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button and share it with a friend who loves a good drama. And remember to subscribe for more stories of justice served cold. Thanks for watching.